Chris Pycroft was asked about the Safe Schools program.
An interesting one with the New South Wales, because the debate I think here in New South Wales has been very different to what it's been in a lot of other states and territories, because New South Wales is only one of two states that currently has a Liberal government. States that have a Labor government, it's been a lot more supportive. In terms of federal funding for the program, it's got less than 3 months left in its current structure. What we are going to see when the 1st of July rolls around is that there will be at least half of the states and territories that will have their own version of Safe Schools, which will either be announced before or be in the process of being implemented for July 1. New South Wales is one of the states where that's not going to happen, unfortunately. Having said that, there are a couple of organisations, including ours, that are working grit and teeth, going, you need to make sure you're still doing something to look after LGBTI young people in schools. We've seen research that came out, I think this was in 2014, that it came out, that said that half of LGBTI students in schools do not feel safe when they're at school. And that's a significant problem. And that's something that we're actively looking to address. Within the past 10 years in New South Wales, we saw what was originally Proud Schools, which again was something that was adopted from Victoria and put into a New South Wales context. We've seen programs like Safe Schools, which were rolled out nationally. You've now got states that have directly adopted that into their own state, branched out from the federal government. You are going to have states like Western Australia that will now do kind of their own versions of the program, which will be relevant to people in Western Australia. We need to bring states like New South Wales on board and go, right, this is still an important issue for students here in New South Wales. You're hearing too much debate about gender ideology and all of those kinds of things in the media. Disregard it because it's all factually incorrect. Let's focus on actually the students themselves. That's the one thing that's been missing from all of this attention that's been going out there, is actually, what do young people specifically think of this program? It was designed for them to make them feel safe and supported, and equip schools with how to make sure that they are being inclusive, that it's not just about them, but it's making sure that it's about everybody, that everybody feels safe and supported, and that there's no specific bullying towards young gay people, specifically in schools. And that's something, of course, that we absolutely want to see continue. I think particularly last year, the fact that there was such negative debate on so many issues. 2016, I think, was a really, really tough year for the community. You saw things like the rampant debate on safe schools, you saw it around the plebiscite, and then you saw two really horrific things happen in Orlando and what happened with Tyrone Unsworth. I think the past 12 to 18 months has been a really heartbreaking time for the community, and I know that I was seeing on a daily basis people within community going, I'm feeling really frustrated, I'm feeling really depressed, I'm feeling really upset about all of these things. And I actually come from a mental health advocacy background. I've been doing that a lot longer than what I've actually been doing gay rights. It was the mental health advocacy that actually got me involved in the gay and lesbian rights lobby. And so I've been working with organisations on the ground, specifically around things that happened to do with Tyrone, around things that happened with Orlando. I was actually directly working with all of these organisations and also working with them to prepare on the prospect of there being a plebiscite. I'm so glad that none of that work actually came to fruition, but that was months upon months upon months of organisations and trying to work with them to be prepared. There were organisations like Drummond Street in Victoria, for instance, that saw a 100% uptake in service demand because of the fact that even just the political debate itself was happening. That's not, publicly funded campaigns or anything like that. That's just politicians talking about it in Parliament. And that was having a significant uptake in service, delivery and demand. You saw mainstream suicide prevention services and crisis support services like Lifeline needing to log the number of calls that came through because of political debate about the plebiscite. These are all of the kind of things that I'm kind of working with, in the sense of making sure that suicide prevention organisations and mental health services are prepared, but also just making sure that just even kids in schools, that they are in environments where they feel safe and supported, because half of them don't. You know, half of them dread going to school every single day because they don't think it's a safe environment, and that's a significant problem. And when you see organisations and far-right politicians debating a program that's supposed to make them feel safe and supported, that's a massive problem. So it's really unfortunate that we are no longer going to have a federally funded program as of the 1st of July, but we're doing absolutely everything that we can to make sure that something is in place in New South Wales to make sure that, you know, those young kids do feel safe and supported. Now, it's one of my concerns that people are going to get angry once the federal budget rolls around in the second week of May. It will very much dawn on them that, you know, Safe Schools is not going to be federally funded. People are going to look and go, what's going to happen here in New South Wales? And there's no answer for that question. And that's something which is going to be of a concern to a lot of people. So, you know, organisations like the Gay and Lesbian Rights Lobby, we're working with organisations like ACON and Family Planning and all of those organisations on proactively trying to introduce solutions to make sure that something of some kind is on the ground on July 1 and being able to go out to the community and going out to all of those kids going, we've got your back and we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that you feel safe and supported no matter what.
Okay, what I'm drawing attention to in my thinking, is rather than this notion of having a federally funded program, what actually needs is a change in the culture whereby a teacher is able to develop these, and federally funded programs tend to provide support which is not very useful because there's a disconnect between, and I'll take myself back. So we would, I mean, I was even involved in programs, a writing program, for example, where all sorts of good advice was given about how to teach writing, and it's been disagreed with since, but that's all right. And we would ask for professional development support, but even professional development support, it doesn't work unless there's a supportive culture amongst the teachers and indeed amongst the community. And federally funded programs subject to that sort of criticism, you know, like political criticism. Why? I mean, are those programs effective? Okay, they do provide support, but they don't bring about the change in and of themselves. It's top down.
I would say the resources are really important for teachers on the ground to be able to direct, like, you know, the high rates of mental health issues and suicide ideation and suicidal behaviour from young people. It is important that teachers and people who are in direct contact with those students do have access to those resources. So I think sometimes, you know, the implementation of various things, you're right, and providing ongoing support to people is also critical, but I think that just to provide a body of evidence that can support people who are in a direct position of dealing with very vulnerable people would be very important.
And but when you're cutting back on the number of counsellors, the mental health aspect.
Oh, you should. Well, again, I would argue that don't do that.
Look, and I think that's a very interesting space at the moment, and it's one of the things specifically about the Safe Schools program, which hasn't necessarily been talked about that much, but has actually had such a significant impact, is that as a part of the Safe Schools program, you can actually request for facilitators to actually come out to your school and actually provide that on the ground thing. And that's kind of one thing which exists that kind of complements other things. I know that the New South Wales government in particular is looking at increasing the number of counsellors that are specifically that are specifically embedded within the schools. Organisations like ours, we also look at things like, for instance, there's a new draft PDHPE curriculum which looks at addressing kind of LGBTI young people and issues that they face, specifically as a part of their health classes. And we make a conscious effort of feeding into that process, because by making sure, now that they're in the process of reviewing this actual state curriculum itself, if we can get this sufficiently included as a part of the curriculum now that would get signed off by the New South Wales government, it means that organisations like, they were previously called the Department of Education, but I think they've just rebranded themselves. I think they're called NEDA now, or something along those lines. By having it as a part of this new curriculum which will exist moving forward, which is going to exist for students from kindergarten through to year 10, and different, different parts of the curriculum and different stages will be relevant to different students. By making sure that it's included as a part of that, it means that, government agencies can actually produce resources that are relevant, that teachers can take and apply to their own individual school context, and be a part of that kind of discussion that they can have in the classroom and go, yes, this is a conversation that you can have. It's a part of the curriculum, but it's also what you can do to make schools more inclusive and apply that within the context of your own school. There's not a strict mandate that you need to teach this in a specific way. It's flexible enough to go, right, understand the needs of your students, what it is that they're suggesting that they need. Here are some kind of core resources that you can use, but here are things which you can also adapt and apply in your own local context as well. So organisations like ours aren't looking at it from just the safe schools aspect of it. We're looking at it across the whole spectrum.
Yes, except that with the efforts that you put in, you generate these materials, but how does it change the relationships between the teachers and their kids?
How long's a piece of string?
Yes, it's a small question for you there, Chris.
I think that's the more important question.
Yeah,
For you to consider after marriage equality goes through and the sort of general acceptance of them.
Yeah, look, it's something that's kind of really, really difficult, and I think one of the strategies which I think that we've got, which the particular state government I think is very much trying to push, is the fact that they've been very, very supportive of Gonski funding and gone, right, okay, we need to address these kinds of social and bullying issues as a whole. And admittedly they're not being incredibly loud about this, but something which they're being very conscious of is making sure that kind of the needs and the support of LGBTI students are being included as a part of that. They're not specifically making it stand out and going, right, here's LGBTI, we're going to make lots of loud noise about this. They're just subtly including it so that when teachers do recognise that they need the support specifically from students, that students are coming with them to that need, that there's sufficient resourcing that's available for schools to be able to engage in that process. I think one of the things which we've also got as well, which we're hoping to see continue, is the growing number of counsellors which are specifically being put into New South Wales schools. One of the real concerns that we had specifically around the government review that went into the Safe Schools program last year was that if parents didn't agree to their child participating in classes that were around the Safe Schools program, then by default they would then be directed to a school counsellor. If a school did not have a school counsellor, then there was the potential risk of them, instead of going to a counsellor, going to someone that's funded under the chaplaincy program, which creates a whole different problem in itself. And the moment that I saw the review came out, that was the first thing that went into my mind, going, this is surely not something that can be a reality. It's something that we are starting to see, is the increased funding and the number of counsellors that are going into schools, and we're working with other organisations like Family Planning who are advocating, going, if you're going to introduce all of these counsellors and new staff into schools, that's fantastic. They're going to need, it doesn't necessarily need to be an incredible amount, but it does need to be some kind of education and training around LGBTI young people. They experience different needs, they have different social circumstances, they experience different elements of life that a lot of other people don't necessarily experience. And there needs to kind of be that kind of cultural and social awareness. So admittedly, it's not something that we're making a huge amount of noise about, particularly in this current climate. If you make noise about all of these things, go, look at all of these fantastic things that we're doing, then unfortunately we're going to see our, opponents go, oh, look, all of a sudden, gender theory in New South Wales schools is being changed because that's what our opponents are going with. So it's unfortunate that we have to kind of chip away at this really subtly, but it's something that we're incredibly conscious of. We don't look at it just from a high school perspective, we also look at it from a university perspective as well. One of the projects which we, I think, decided over Christmas 2015 that we were going to do was the Australian LGBTI University Guide. It's the first, I think it's only the second guide that exists in the world that actually assesses every university within a country on how LGBTI inclusive they are, whether there are support services in place for students, whether there's practical education and training that's available for teachers, whether support services are sufficient to support LGBTI young people. And so we're looking at it from kind of all different angles and spectrums, but on a high school level, it's something that we can't make a whole lot of noise about because of the current political climate and how loud and how potentially successful the no side is in misconstruing genuine good work and going, oh, but all of a sudden this debate is about transgender bathrooms. No, it's not. It's just about just making sure that young gay people can feel safe when they go to school. That's all this is about. And so much of that is being misconstrued. So it's all this kind of subtle work that's happening behind the scenes, but we're chipping away at it bit by bit. It's a little bit more difficult in New South Wales, being one of two states that do have a Liberal government, but it's something that we're conscious of and we're chipping away at it bit by bit.